Hey there, welcome to Board Game Hot Takes. My name's Tim,
And this is Chris.
This is Adam.
and today we're going to be giving our hot take review on the game we just finished playing, River of Gold. But before we get into that game, I have some poll results to go over with you. As of around 6:30 tonight when we're recording, the poll had some results, but I just put it out like 3 hours earlier, so they may be drastically changed if you go look at it now, but feel free to leave your feedback and we'll still read it. So the question I asked was, does the huge number of board games available these days make you happy or stress you out? The options I gave on the poll: number one, I love the variety in options, and that got 78%. Number two, it makes me unhappy because I can't play them all. That got 13%. Number three, I don't like it because people aren't sharing a common experience with so much variety being out there. That got 0%. And then number four, all these poll options are wrong and Tim is awarded no points. And that got 9%.
No points.
How'd you guys answer that?
I think I put the one that you said had 0%, but I don't know which site you're reading from. So I know there was a certain percent.
Yeah, this was on Patreon and you probably
Okay.
were on Facebook.
I think I did the Facebook one, right?
Yeah.
So it was the one that had common experience. So I think that'd be neat if there was like, I don't know, 50 games a year, 100 games a year, and everybody kind of played the same ones and we knew all, what everybody else was talking about. Whereas, I don't know, how many games do we play a year? Maybe, I don't know, 50 to 100. And whereas there's like 3,000 being published. So we don't know what 80% of the games that other people play and what they're talking about. So it would be kind of neat, I think, if we all had that sort of common ground and we could discuss the same things. And it probably, there's a few that emerge as favorites or whatever that everybody does seem to get to play. And there is a little bit of common ground and something that everybody can share and have their own opinions about and argue about or whatever. So I think that's kind of fun. But yeah, I thought that was a fun poll question. It was weird how you worded. I don't like hate it because not everybody had. I think it'd be neat if there was fewer games so we could have a common ground.
I said D. Tim gets no points. No, I didn't really say that. I don't.
Wait,
really
are you talking about the gameplay tonight, Chris? Or are you talking about the poll question?
Maybe both. I don't know. I don't have any problem with there being way more games than I'll ever play. I have an amazing ability to ignore things that don't matter to me. So there may be a million.
That's why Chris is he's such a happy person.
There's so many games out there and that I will never play. And I get Adam's point that, it would be nice if we were all kind of playing the same games. But in reality, it feels to me like 99% of the time when somebody mentions a new game or something that they play that they enjoy, it's usually something I've heard of before or have played before. So I feel like even with all those games out there, we still are playing a lot of the same games. So yeah, I think that mitigates it a little bit. So yeah, I don't have any problem with having all those games out there, even if I'm never going to play them.
Well, instead of answering myself, the first listener response I'm going to read is from Chris, and he said all of the above at different times. And that's kind of my feeling. Like I looked at all these options and I'm like, sometimes I feel this way. Sometimes I feel this way. The idea of sharing a common experience is interesting because it does feel like we've gotten away from that. It's kind of like the old ages of network TV where everybody knew the 3 television shows that were going to be on the 7 o'clock time slot. And you were watching one of those 3 and that's what you were talking about with your friends. And now it's like dozens of streaming services and you have no idea what anyone else is watching and it's hard to keep up with everything. And board games are kind of in the same path, but the reality is that the standouts continue to stand out. And so like you can talk to anybody that's in the board game hobby and they've played Dune Imperium and they've played Arc Nova. And, so there's still those standouts that you can kind of have that shared experience with. So I feel like maybe it's not missing as much as I was thinking it was when I made the poll, but it is, it's nice when that happens.
See, we still have things to talk about around the water cooler.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Well, let me jump into some of the other listener responses on this. So Susan said, I'm definitely not happy that I can't play them all, but I went with the more positive response because I do love all the variety. Mindy said, yay, my first time voting in a poll. Welcome, Mindy. That's awesome that you voted in a poll today. You kick ass. Keep coming back. Keep voting on these polls. She said, I voted for the first option, but the variety does seem overwhelming at times, especially with limited space, time, and budget. And then Aaron said, and this is the one that's really the real answer here. All these poll options are wrong, and I award no points because I like the variety, but it makes it much harder to find the wheat from the chaff. There might be a larger number of good, maybe great games, but there's a flood of mediocre to bad games. Finding the good ones have just become more difficult. And I think this is the key, and that's why you still have standouts, right? There's still the great games are standing out. People are getting to play them. They hear everybody else talking about them. They hear everyone else excited about them. They eventually get to play them. But you do have a lot of chatter about the latest Kickstarter that came in that you're excited about because you've been waiting for it for so long, but nobody else actually wants to hear about that game, I promise. So yeah, anyway, I think pretty aligned here. It's good that there's a variety for everyone's got different games to play, but it's there's a lot to filter through. This is why you should be listening to board game podcasts that give you honest reviews and opinions about games, because you'll know what to play and what not to play.
This does make me grateful that we don't have a podcast based on like a general survey of what's happening out there in board game world, because I could never keep up with that. We focus on a game or two at a time.
Yeah, we're keep it pretty light, pretty tight. All right, well, we're going to talk about a game tonight, and you'll get to hear our honest review and opinion about it, and that is River of Gold. So let's jump into a game description with it. In River of Gold, you play as merchants from competing clans in the realm of Rokugan, a name you might recognize from our frequent talks of Battle for Rokugan, both games set in the fictional setting of Legends of the Five Rings. You'll be trying to establish a trade empire while vying for influence with the nobility. River of Gold is a mid-weight order fulfillment game, and each turn consists of either sailing your ship down the river and activating all buildings in the area where you stopped, building buildings, which will give you influence and extra benefits when other players visit that region, and fulfilling orders if you've collected enough resources to match the requirements of the customer cards in your hands. They'll in turn give you a variety of benefits. All these options, though, are limited by a dice roll at the start of each of your turns. It tells you which region you can build in, which customers you can trade with, and how far you can move on the river. Like any good Euro, though, there is a way to mitigate that dice roll. By spending Divine Favor. Each region adjacent to the river has its own influence track with randomized scoring benefits for having the most or second most influence at the end of the game, so don't let your opponents get too far ahead of you. Once all the available buildings have been built, the end game is triggered. You'll score points for your regional influence for some bonuses provided by satisfied customers, and for the number of customers you've served, and the player with the most points is going to win. River of Gold was designed by Keith Piggott and published by Office Dog. So this was our first play tonight. All three of us played for the first time on Board Game Arena. Let's jump into the gameplay and mechanisms of River and Gold.
The gameplay, first thing that stood out to me was the simplicity of the game. Basically, you have three actions. You can sail, you can deliver, or you can, I don't even remember the other one, sail, deliver, or build. That's it, sail, deliver, build. So you just have those three choices. Sometimes you can't even build because you don't have enough money. You have to worry about that. Lots of times you can't even deliver because you don't have the stuff you need to deliver. So what are you going to do? You're going to sail. So, and that's the main, right? That's a river of gold. You're sailing down this beautiful river of gold. We'll talk about more about that in the production. But you've got these two boats to choose from. You pick one and you move it whatever number is on your die. Your one single die. You don't have to worry about 5 die or 3 dice or 2 dice. And that's it. You pick up your ship, move it down. So that's what you're doing. A lot of the game and the decisions that come from there are just fantastic. So the simplicity of it, I'm going to start right there. I think that was fantastic and a standout for me.
Yeah, and adding to that simplicity, that die really made things simple because it highly limited what you were able to actually do. And I'm saying that not in a bad way. It actually made the decision space, I think, much tighter. So when you had your die, it had a number on it and it had a little insignia for a region on it. And regardless of what it is that you wanted to do, whether it was delivering to a customer, whether it was moving your boat, or it was building in a region, you were 100% restricted by that die, like Tim was talking about. Now, there was a way to mitigate that, and that definitely opened up the decision space a little bit. But in reality, getting that divine favor, that was not easy to do. It was not an easy process getting the divine favor, and I thought it was going to be easier than it was. And so early on in the game, I went and I spent all my divine favor moving this dice around so that I was able to do a couple of things early on that seemed pretty important. And boy, was I sorry about it, because I quickly found myself rolling dice that I didn't like and couldn't do the things I wanted to do. And I'd used up all of my divine favor on previous turns, so I wasn't able to do a lot of those things. But what an interesting limitation the dice put. And it was also a very pretty little die too. So I thought that was actually a pretty neat part of the game.
Now, I was going to start positive here, but since you guys both brought this up, I'm going to respond and just talk about the fact that, and again, I don't know that this necessarily makes it negative, because this game was very chill. It felt like a very relaxed experience. I didn't stress out. My brain was not burning in this game at all. And as I was thinking through it, I think it's because the game kind of just played itself. And let me explain this to you. So let's say that we didn't have that divine favor, and we roll our die and it's got a 4 on it. So here's my decision tree, and it was the exact same every single time. Do I have enough money to build a building in region 4? No? Okay, move to the next thing. Do I have the right resources to ship to one of my my customers? No, move to the next thing. And that is, okay, now I've got 2 boats I can move. Which of the 2 regions is going to give me the better benefits? Hopefully one that I'm triggering for myself as well. That was my decision tree every single round in the game, which means that I actually didn't have any decisions to make. The game just told me what to play. Now, the gameplay... So
if that's the case, Tim, the game got you in 3rd place out of 3. So did the game really play itself?
I don't want to take that win away from you. Now, listen, there's some subtlety here, right? Because if you have divine favor, you can adjust a little bit, but it wasn't too far off still. If you didn't have more than 4 coins, you weren't building a building, so you skipped that decision. If you didn't have the resources to fill one of your visitors, it doesn't matter what your dice roll was, you skip that decision. And then it just comes down to, do you want to adjust to do one of the boat movements? So again, it was very chill because you didn't have a lot of choices here. It was pretty much like whatever the dice gave you, and depending on the stuff you had, you kind of move things. Now, there was interesting things that happened, and I was gonna let me just, going from that, jump into what my favorite part was and why I still enjoyed the game regardless. And that is that when you did move your boat, you got a ton of benefits from it every time. It was always fun. Like every time you moved your boat, even if there were no buildings built there, you got a ton of coins, which was great because you meant you were building a building the next turn. Every time that you completed a visitor's request, every time you fulfilled one of those orders, they gave you usually an immediate benefit and some ongoing benefit and maybe some end game scoring. So they were all really fun and mostly, somewhat varied in that you got different things from it. Even when you built a building, you immediately moved up the influence tracks. And these were great. We'll talk more about these tracks, but the tracks had bonuses throughout them. So almost every time you moved up a track, you got some little additional bonus. So it's like every turn, even if you didn't make a lot of choices, fun things still happen. And that was my favorite part about it. I thought those parts of just having that variety and the kind of the surplus of things that happened for you, no matter what you did, that was fun for me.
Well, Tim says you have to make choices. He's totally wrong. The best choices you had to make in this game were your customers and what they wanted. Each of these customers had some little requirements. You had to give them a couple things of silk and some blue barrels and some green things, and then they'd be happy. And then on those, you get, I think, some sort of instant bonus maybe. But then there lots of times they had an in-game bonus. So I found myself looking at these in-game bonuses. Okay, what do I need to work towards? And you could build up over your turns and start planning to, I needed to go up the tree track. I'd get double points if I was highest. Well, no matter where I ended on the tree track, I'd get double points. So I had that in mind throughout the whole game. Oh, okay, how am I going to work that out and get highest on that track? Or I'd get some points I had 2 cards. 2 of the customers gave me an extra point per 5 coins that I had. So I was like, oh, okay. I get double points for having all these coins. So by the end of the game, I want to have a bunch of coins in my stash. So there was a lot of things that worked towards that. Simple rule set made it graspable. I've said to Chris, even during the course of play, like, hey, it's nice to finally play a game I can grasp by the middle of it and have it make sense to me. Tim from the beginning of this thing was like, oh, this game is so straightforward. It's so easy, so simple. Not for me, not for everybody, Tim. All right, let's slow it down there, bro. So some of us take a little longer than others to get this, but this one started making sense to me. I think I did a little summary of the rules on a single page, so I was able to look up and down at that super quickly. But yeah, I think the customers, it's just a pick up and deliver or a contract fulfillment, whatever you want to call it. I like that. They had some nice, in-game bonuses, simple stuff. It's nothing we haven't seen before, but it fit together nicely here.
Yeah, and as simple as it might have been in terms of the decisions being made, each turn, the interplay of the different things, like whether when you delivered an order, there was a benefit. There was three different benefits usually that came from the particular customer that you had, and in each of those had a pretty different. Like, for example, well, I'll just give an example rather than try to explain it. So if you delivered for an elder, which I think was considered like the highest level, they were the ones that were hardest to fulfill. If you fulfilled an elder, then you got to put a marker down on a spot in that region that doubled the benefit of a particular space. And if you had I forget what the monk, oh yeah, the monk gave you higher levels of divine, what was it called? Divine favor.
Divine favor, yeah.
So they all had different, they might have been the same types of customers, but each one gave you a slightly different kind of benefit, and each one gave you potentially that benefit in a different area, depending on the type of delivery you're doing, because it would limit that benefit to a specific region. So there are all these little things happening that, like we've all said how relatively simple this was. And by the way, Adam, for his modest talk about his non-Euro gamer brain, came in first place, and there I was dead, middle at number 2. But it felt like
who was in last place?
Well, the game gave me last place, as we discussed.
The game.
Oh, okay.
Did you play the game, Tim, or did the game play you?
The game definitely played me.
So I definitely felt like there was decisions being made, and a couple times I made a counterintuitive decision, or at least one that at first seemed counterintuitive to me, because I determined, correctly or incorrectly, that there was some bigger benefit from doing this sort of the less suboptimal thing. Like, I may have wanted to do a delivery, but right now the delivery that I was able to make was, I had 2 deliveries. One of them I could make, one of them I couldn't, and the one that I could make was not as beneficial as the other one. So maybe it made more sense for me to hold off and do that delivery later, because maybe I had more resources placed in that particular region. So there was a fair amount of decisions being made, and I don't think it was quite as simple as we're suggesting.
There's one other thing I wanted to mention, is that were some common goals in this game, and there's basically 3 cards that are out that are variable every game that will kind of give you some things to move towards, to work towards. And I like that. I like it when games do that. It reminded me a little bit of Distilled, where it kind of really pushes you to focus on certain areas, and everybody's racing for them. Now the point difference on it, first place got 7 points, second place got 5, third place got 3. Yeah, it's important to get first versus third, but it's not like it's that drastically big of a deal if you don't get the first place on every one of them. But I enjoyed that. I like when there's the variable goals to work towards. So that was fun.
What else? I like that you had this river going down the middle, and when you get to the end of the river, you got a few bonuses. So just doing that sail thing, if you could cruise down that river pretty quick, you get some more bonuses by the time you hit the end of that river. And it was like Pac-Man or like Great Western Trail. You go off the end of the world and then come back in at the beginning of the world, come back in on the other side and start it all over again. So I thought that was cool. And then the river itself, every spot had 4 little bonus things attached to it. Chris pointed that out to me. He really liked how it didn't matter where you went, you were getting, and we said that already this review, that you get tons of stuff. 4 things, whether it's buildings, usually the buildings would give you more stuff. Well, for sure the buildings give you more stuff, and the empty spots would just give you a coin. So it was cool to watch that fill up over time, nice arc over time. And then the buildings got more expensive as the game went on too. So I thought that was, all the cheap spots go first, the $8, $9 spots, and then it goes up to $12, $14 or something by the end. So no one's putting those in because that's like too pricey right there. But all those cheap buildings are going quick, and they're moving your boats to where you're going to get the most stuff. So you can, there's so many decisions to be made here, Tim. So many great choices to be made.
Yeah, and that whole thing about filling in the spaces, that was actually a big part of the fun, was filling in those spaces in a way that gave you a benefit if you were to move your boat there, or if you were to build something there. But also, if somebody else built something, you got to benefit from that too. And this sort of dovetails back to where Tim was talking before about how every time you did something good happened. It felt to me in this game like nothing bad ever happened to you. You may not have been able to optimize every turn, but every time something happened, almost every time something happened, something good happened to you. You got some kind of bonus. You got some kind of benefit. You got some points or whatever. Even when other people are taking their turns, and I found this very engaging, if they landed on your spot, you got a benefit. If you landed on somebody else's spot, even though you're giving a benefit to somebody else, you're also getting a benefit. So it's somehow this game managed to create this really sweet spot of never really punishing you for anything. And I thought that was actually a really pleasant vibe.
Yeah, every turn did feel fun. And every turn felt, rewarding, I would say. But one of my favorite things in games, one of my favorite mechanisms is when you get to build new action spaces or build, like you see this occasionally in worker placement games, like Lords of Waterdeep does this, where you can build a worker placement space, someone else uses it, they get the benefit. If they don't use it, then it's available for you to use and you get the big reward on it. And I love that. I think that's really cool. And this game did that really well. So like I said, building buildings just seemed like the best move all the time, because you're setting yourself up for the rest of the game for success, but also you get that influence on the tracks that end up being a lot of the end game scoring with it. All right, well, that is about all the mechanisms I think that the game has to offer. So we're going to talk about the production and theme of River of Gold.
I'm going to start with the production here. I kept talking about it while we were playing. It is, to me, absolutely gorgeous. It's got this, what stands out most is the River of Gold itself. It's got this golden foil on it, so you move it around in the light, or you move your head, and you get the light glinting off of that and shining. And the way that foil is in there is like these currents, these little waves and drifts of water. So it's beautiful. Then beyond that, you have the landscape of this mythical Japanese land of Rokugan, and the art is just beautiful. So many things here on the map I just kept wanting to look at. I have a picture up now on Board Game Geek. I'm just staring at it. It's just lovely to look at. It's got these sort of watercolor, very mellow tones. You got the river coming down the middle, and you got the building spaces on either side of the river going down. And then as the map expands, you've got the subtle tones beyond that. And then these, spreadsheety grids, the tracks for each region that are easily labeled, easy to understand and see what's going on there. Those have a corresponding dice number and symbol. So the production here, I think, is absolutely lovely. I know Chris has some negatives to say about it, but as far as the game board itself, beautiful.
Spoiler alert, the negative is pretty mild. So let me start with agreeing with everything that you just said, Adam, about the art. And I mean, the board art, it's not exciting, but the board is very attractive. It's a nice looking board. But I think where the game shines is in the card art and in the player board art, like in the factions. Looking at those pictures on the faction boards, absolutely beautiful. That kind of castles receding in the mist on the cliff sides. And I mean, it's absolutely striking. And the art that was on the cards, the different customer cards, I thought was delightful. I mean, sometimes you find pictures of people on cards, even if it's just a plain picture of a person, but it's so expressive and so fun to look at that it's a pleasure to do that. And I'm trying to think of another example off the top of my head. I know that we've had a bunch of these where the artists just do such a nice job with people creating interesting characters, even if they're very new, very generic, like the Elder. It's an elder, but it's an elder who looks like a real person having a real, in a real world. The one complaint that I have, and this is a complaint, I think we talked about this, or I brought this one up on one of our discussions about biggest flaws in production or something like that.
Production pet peeves.
Yeah, that's right. Production pet peeves. The cards are all the same for each type of card. There are elders, but they all are the same dude, kind of doing this, like, let me give you a hug gesture with a big smile on his face. He looks great, but it's the same guy over and over and over and over again. The same with the monks and the nobles and all that. This game could have benefited so richly from having more card art so that each one of those cards was a little bit more personalized. I think that would have been delightful, but other than that, I really don't have any complaints about the production.
Yeah, and slight counterpoint to that is that I didn't even realize that we were about 3/4 of the way through the game when Chris mentioned it, and then I started looking and realized I could see that. But you only see like maybe 6, 7 cards in the game. You don't see a ton of these. So sure, and you see the ones that other people have laid out on the table. So sure, it would be nice if they had some different art, but I wouldn't say that it wasn't like Revive where you have like 3 characters of the exact same look on your player, like in your tableau at the same time. So minor, but I get it, Chris. It makes sense.
For what it's worth, let me just add on that one that the entire game, I had 2 of the same people in my hand at all times. And they changed over time, but it was always 2 the same person.
All right. Well, yeah, fair, fair. Yeah, I like the production here a lot. I think it looks really nice. It's kind of like nice, ancient Japanese art style, the kind of muted pastel, ocean waves and it looks. I was telling the guys that like, I don't know who owns the IP for Battle for Rokugan, but the for Legend of the Five Rings, but the 2 games we played in this world, which is Battle for Rokugan and then City of or River of Gold, they definitely have that same level of quality of the look and feel in the game, and the same level of kind of streamlined gameplay as well. So it's nice that these 2 games in this world really feel like they, even though they're very different games, they feel like they fit together, and the production kind of matches along with that. So I enjoyed the production. I thought it was great, and I do love that board with that shimmery gold running down the middle of it. That's a really nice production touch.
And then what else have you got? You've got the wooden ships and just some wooden circles that sort of track each player's, things that they own. I thought those were a pleasant too, not super spectacular, but no need for plastic miniatures or silk screen thingies here. The wooden ships and circles do a nice job here, and then nice colors too that fit in with the theme.
Yeah, and that die, the custom die that comes with it, is pretty cool too. I mean, the die really kind of dictates everything you're doing, so you're using it a lot, you're looking at it a lot, and the artwork on it, there's a different symbol for each of the regions that you can land in, and then a little number kind of in a script, and it's an absolute, it's a beautiful die.
Oh, I did want to mention the user experience here. I thought worked really well. All the iconography was easy to understand after a first glance at it, and like really never major questions at all coming out of that. And then the way the cards were laid out was easy to consume and process. The way that the board was laid out, surprisingly, even though you had this kind of twisty river with all kinds of different sections connected to it, they somehow made it where it was really easy to read all the buildings that are connected in that region, and which region, which influence you're actually being impacted by. So the user experience here was great for for all the kind of stuff that could have gone wrong. It all went pretty well. All right, well, let's get into our final question, and that is, would you request to play River of Gold?
I think I would request to play this game again. Surprisingly, going into this one, I was like, here we go, another midweight Euro. It's not going to do anything different than 50 other games that we've played. We've got some tracks that are going to go up and some stuff that's going to happen, and we're going to get some resources and deliver some stuff and blah. But surprisingly, I enjoyed it. It was so streamlined. Like, I think about playing Great Western Trail, which, this base thing is basically a track, a rondelle. You're going around and you're coming back to the beginning, and get rid of the cows, get rid of the deck building, and give me some tracks that are like kind of cool, not super essential, but yeah, you get some bonuses if you go up, and give me some easy delivery stuff. I enjoyed this game like 1 billion times more than Great Western Trail, and 1 billion times more than a bunch of resource management games that are heavier for the sake of being heavy. I feel like you get just as much out of this game as you do out of 1 billion other games that have been made that are like, have all these systems that tie in together, and you got to figure this thing out so you can get this, so you can pull out this resource, and look, you got some little bonus card over here, now you get this thing. This is so streamlined and so boiled down. I really enjoy it, and I didn't think I would. Now, as far as replayability, am I going to be able to go back to this one again and again and again? I don't know about that. It might get stale after a while, or it might not, so I'll try it a few more times. It's not anything mind-blowing, but I had a lot more fun playing it than I thought I would.
I agree with everything you just said, Adam. Very, very nicely said. This is a game that well, actually, I guess I should answer the question first. Yes, I would ask to play this game again. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think I mentioned to you guys at the beginning of the game tonight that after a couple turns, that when I watched the video about this, I'm like, this is going to be so boring. This is going to be the dumbest game we've ever played. I actually found myself really enjoying this game. And part of it was the fact that it was not too taxing. It was not too much of a brain burner. It's probably not going to be the centerpiece of a big game night, but it could be a great game to play on a night when you don't need a big centerpiece game, or when you have a second game and you want something that's kind of short. It's a game where the die and the limited number of options gives you a decision space that's not overwhelming. I don't always want to be racking my brain. Sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. And when I don't, this is a kind of game that's going to fit nicely. It has a very satisfying vibe. The fact that you keep taking these moves that are giving you these little, dopamine hits, which we haven't said for a long time. I feel like we need to talk about dopamine hits more. All those little dopamine hits from, you taking your turn and getting a benefit, or your opponent taking a turn and you getting a benefit from that. That all feels great. What's funny is this actually feels like exactly the kind of game that my Portland game group would probably really enjoy. Something that you can play in a relatively short amount of time, has a nice decision space, and has a nice vibe to it. I think I already said that I probably wouldn't buy this one. I mean, I didn't fall in love with it like that, but it actually seems like a game that for me would probably have a lot of utility. So maybe I'll change my mind about that, but I definitely want to explore this one a little bit more. It's on BGA, so I want to keep playing it there a little bit. And ultimately, I don't play any game often enough to get bored of it that quickly. So I'm not too worried about, getting bored of it faster than, I don't fear that it's going to wear out its welcome too quickly to me.
It's interesting. You guys kept mentioning the word decision, or the term decision space, and I just don't see it. I don't think there is a decision space here. I think I've mentioned during the gameplay that like really all it was missing was that second dice that Castle of Burgundy gives you, where you actually have a couple choices and then have to make those out of a variety of selections. That game, like I said, kind of ran on the rails for me. I never really felt like I was making a choice. My turn came up, I ran through the decision tree, and then took my turn. That said, it was a very relaxing and it was a very enjoyable experience. It's okay to have some games that are like that. Would I request to play this? This game had zero tension. It had zero excitement. The only frustration it had was because my dice roll didn't let me do the thing that I needed to do that turn. And instead I had to wait a turn. Well, that wasn't very fun. So there wasn't like the kind of frustration of like, ooh, somebody got in my way. Yes, there's interaction because you're interacting with other people's buildings, but you rarely made a choice to say like, I'm going to get in their way, or I'm going to piggyback off them, or things like that, from my perspective. So it wasn't very interesting from a choice perspective. It was very delightful to just kind of go through the motions and enjoy it. I don't think I'd request to play it. There is certainly a space for this. There's the game group. I'm actually going to be talking about a game on our on the table segment where this would have been probably a better fit for the people I was playing with and the challenges that came up with it. But I think there's a space for this. It's just not a game that I would be the one saying, oh, I cannot wait to get this game played, get it on the table tonight. So I'd probably pass on requesting it. If you guys include me in a BGA async game, I'd be happy to try it a couple more turns and see if I just got tired of seeing that turn come up and I just click the same option every time. Or maybe it does get more interesting and I learn from repeated plays of where you can optimize and stuff like that. But so, kind of met my expectations after reading the rule book. I thought it was going to kind of fit right within this space. Less decisions than I was hoping for, but more enjoyable than I was expecting. So it worked okay.
Makes me wonder, Adam, are you and I getting soft? Is Tim not enough tension? I mean, he would maybe if the ships could fire at each other when they landed on the the same spot. I don't know, Tim.
We need some sort of bid war where we could take each other out in this game and sink our ships. Oof.
All right. Well, that will wrap up our discussion on River of Gold. We're going to jump into some games that have been on our table right after this. All right. Welcome back. What have you guys been playing this week?
Well, I'm going to go back to a game we just reviewed, Tikal. This is by Kiesling and Kramer, originally developed in 1999. We've gone back and played this one a couple times. One of the listeners, Chris Prime, he is playing with us on one game right now. And this game has just totally soured for me, and I think soured for us. We talked about it on the chat. We're not looking forward to our turns coming around again. And this is why it's souring for me. Maybe you guys can chime in on this too. A lot of this game is doing that thing where, all right, now I've got 4 guys here. Now I'm in control of this and I'm going to get the points. Oh, shoot. Now Chris has 5 guys here and now he's in control of it. Well, I guess I'll put 2 more guys over here. Well, maybe I'll give up on that and I'll move my guy. I can move my 1 guy over to this other place. Well, shoot, that just costs 7 action points to get my guy over here. Ugh, that doesn't feel good. There's nothing that really feels super great about this game. I know a lot of the listeners chimed in and said they love this game and they really enjoy it. But at 4, especially, it's a bummer. And we're trying to do the advanced rules with the auction too. So you bid on the places and where you put them. So you're losing points by bidding on stuff. If you want to do that, that doesn't feel good. And then I just don't like, it has an El Grande effect where, oh man, Tim has 8 guys here. I'm gonna put 9 guys here. Now he has 10 guys. Now we have 12 guys here. I don't like that mechanism at all. Who's got the most guys in this space that's going to give you points? It doesn't feel free to me. It feels very confined. I feel like I don't have that fun, creative ability to go out and do some fun things in the game. A bit like River of Gold, where there's not super. Now you're making me realize some things, Tim. But but yeah. So going back to Tikal, I was pretty. You guys were kind of sour on it. I thought, especially with the action point thing. And now I'm just sour on the gameplay itself. I don't mind counting to 10 with my fingers to do the actions, but the gameplay itself has not been exciting on subsequent plays. That's Tikal, souring for me. Bummer.
I'm going to agree with you 100% on that, Adam. I have gotten so bored of this game so fast. We played, I think, 2 games, that maybe the 3 of us, and then we got this 4th game started, and I'm already dreading my turns coming up. I don't enjoy this game. I think I kind of was leaning that way in the review, and it has really settled in that this just is not the game for me. I really dislike games where that kind of area majority is the centerpiece of the whole game, where you're just trying to like dump guys on there. And then the auction thing, we added that in. I hate the auction. Like I'm every time I see that, I'm just like, I don't care. Pass. Yeah, I just want the auction to be over. So I'm glad you brought this up. I feel I never feel good saying bad things about a game, but I think this one, it's an older game. It feels like an older game. It doesn't feel new and fresh. And I've come down on the side of would not play again. Would not ask for this one again.
Would not play again. That's funny. Though, my feelings are almost exactly the same as when in the review. And at the time I said I wouldn't request it, but I'd be okay playing. It's all right. And that's kind of how I feel. It hasn't really changed for me. And the funny thing is you guys keep talking about that area control issue. And yet I have not dealt with that at all, because what I'm doing instead is building my tent in a corner, like leaving you guys out of everything. Every once in a while someone will sneak in and get my way, but it's I've had almost none of that experience where you guys all kind of build straight up all together, clumped together in this little region. I repeated the same way every single game we played. So I'm having a different experience with it, which is that the game's fine, but it's not exciting for me. So I'm totally fine if I don't get any more invites on that one. It's funny, we're in the middle of this 4-player game, and Chris, our listener, kind of said, "Oh man, I'm not really enjoying this game." And then Chris, our Chris, commented on it. And then I was like, "Oh God, can you guys want to just end this?" And I was like, "No, I want to finish it now." So I'm the only one that asked to actually finish it. I actually wanted to finish the game when I was like the least excited about it.
Yeah.
Our review. Yeah. So anyway, fair enough. Well, we've had a chance to try it a little bit.
So on my table this week is a game that I guarantee none of you have ever heard of. But first, a little bit of backstory. Last week, I was in Chicago, or the Chicago suburbs, since Tim made pretty clear to me that I wasn't actually in Chicago. I was in Schaumburg, Illinois, not too far from where our own delightful co-host Tim grew up. And I was there with my brother for a pinball tournament. One of the big pinball tournaments takes place there, and we were there for a long weekend, playing a bunch of pinball, going out, eating some really good, 5-pound slices of pizza in Chicago. and just generally having a good time. But one of the things we do is at the end of the day, once we'd finished our pinballing and our our drinking and our eating, we go back to the hotel and we'd bust out a game to play. And the game that we played this time was a game called KMG. Have you guys ever heard of that one?
I don't think so.
Yeah, I didn't think so either. It's Kenny's Mother's Game, or Kenny's Mother's Gin, depending on where you know it from. But the reason you don't know it, it's because it is a completely homebrewed version of gin rummy that my brother got from his wife's family, and it's got little bits and pieces of all different kinds of games, Rummy Cube and gin rummy, and it's the whole big mishmash of things. And I'm not even going to bother explaining it because it's not going to be, the game itself is not going to be of interest to anybody other than me. But the reason I'm bringing it up is because it was a reminder to me that as much as I dislike sort of basic, or I shouldn't say dislike, as much as I talk about disliking basic card games and the like, there is so much utility in a deck of cards to sit down and do something light and fun and quick and distracting. It's a great, to sip on a beer and play some rounds of cards. It's a nice diversion. My brother is not somebody, he's not a gamer. He's not somebody that I'm going to be sitting down and playing Barrage or Terraforming Mars with, but I love sitting down with him in a deck of cards and playing a game. And so this is a much more philosophical sort of zeitgeisty mention of what's been on the table, because, Kenny's Mother's Game reminded me that I actually can have fun with a simple deck of cards. And that's always, it's always nice to know that you can get a win there.
Well, I have a couple thoughts on this. First and foremost is that there's no way I'm going to find a way to tag this game when I post this on Board Game Geek and have anyone find it because of the tag. So thanks, Chris. The second is that when I was growing up, we played a game called Hand and Foot, which many people may be familiar with. It's a well-known Midwestern, card game, except the version we played doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Somehow my grandma learned it from some friends, and then she taught it to us, and that's the game we've played forever. And it's a blast. It's so much fun. It's a team game. And my grandma, even when she moved to a retirement home in Florida at one point, she was really upset because she went to a Hand and Foot local league, and they wouldn't play by her rules. And they fought her on it and I was like, that's because you made the game up, basically. But isn't it funny how these little homegrown games can, house rules, or even where we've accidentally misplayed games for a long time and still had a ton of fun with them, even though we missed a key rule in it. It's interesting how maybe unimportant some specific rules are, as long as the kind of root of the game exists in the way that it does. And I think, it's interesting. I'm actually going to circle back on this conversation when we get the game I'm going to talk about to the table. But it's interesting, Chris. You had fun with a little deck of cards this weekend.
I did.
Yeah, I'm surprised and pleased that you were able to enjoy a deck of cards. How many simple deck of card games do you actually like, Chris? I think I know of one, the one that you just talked about.
The thing is, I play them so infrequently, I don't even remember the rules to most of them. So I used to play spades and hearts and all, but if you ask me to sit down and do it now, I would need a full teach.
All right.
Well, I would say, Chris, that, at BGGCon, we should introduce you to some, but I'm not going to spend my time. When you get that library of games there,
angering Chris.
Well, because we don't have enough other games to play. So we probably, if we run out of other options, maybe.
Right on. All right. Well, the game I'm going to talk about this week is a game called Gems of Iridescia. And this game is actually not published yet. It is active on Kickstarter right now. And the reason that I had a chance to play this game is because its designer is a listener of ours. And we, a few months back, I happened to mention on an episode that we're interested in reviewing games a little bit more, or getting review copies, because we now have a Patreon and we're giving those games away to our Patreon listeners. So the next day, Roberto reaches out to me. Roberto Pinata is the designer of the game here. And he reaches out and says, hey, I heard this episode. Are you interested in looking at this? And I looked at it, and the production is really cool. The artwork, the production is really beautiful. So it definitely got me intrigued. I dug in a little bit. It's like, sure, send a copy out. I'll take a look at it.
What's the name again, Tim?
It's called Gems of Iridescia. Iridescia is some fictional fantasy world, I guess. Iridescia. I'm not going to spell it out. We'll cut that out in editing. But anyway, so I looked at this game with Roberto, and the funny thing is, after he sent me this is actually a prototype copy. He's only had, I don't know, 10 or 20 of them made or something like that. And he's been sending them around to reviewers, and so when I got done, I'm going to ship it back to Roberto so he can pass it on to the next person. And after I said I'd take a look at this, I just started seeing this game pop up everywhere. Like every reviewer that exists has now looked at this game, has played this game. There's tons and tons. So Roberto's done an amazing job of getting this out there into the world and marketing it. And the Kickstarter is doing great. It's like at 80,000 plus, backers at this point, which is awesome for a game like this. So let me tell you a little bit about the game. Essentially what it is you've got this map out on the board, and it has, I want to say, like 45 little hex tiles laid out, and they're laid from the top to the bottom. There's, I think, 6 in each row going all the way up. So 6 times 9, 45. So as you basically at the start of the game on a turn, what happens is you're going to, wherever your little character is, each player has a character, you're going to flip over 2 tiles, and those are going to reveal a bonus you can get to them. Now, in the first turn, you flip over any on the bottom row, but once you've moved up, then future turns, you're always going to flip 2 that are adjacent to you. And so it's going to show you where you can move into. After you flip them over, you move to one of those 2 spaces, you get what's printed on them. It's usually going to be a gem of one of 4 types that are kind of the resources you're using to fill orders in the game. And then as you get further up the map, you're going to get some bonuses that go with them as well. So there's a couple little decisions to make. So that's kind of the first phase of the round. After that, what you can do is you can basically, you can mine in that space again. So once you've moved into that space, let's say it has emerald in it, then you can spend 3 coins and you can mine. And the way mining works is kind of a little economic element to it. Next to each of these types of gem colors on the board is a little 6-sided dice. It starts at 2, but every time somebody has taken their turn and taken one of those dice, they then flip it up to the next level. So they get more expensive over the course of the game. But in the first round, let's say you move on to an emerald space and then you mine it. So you've got 2 dice in front of you, 2 D6s. You roll them. Let's say you roll a 10. That means you've just gotten 5 of those gems. So you now have 6 emeralds. Okay. And then one of the other actions you can take on your turn is to sell gems, and that is at the market value. So if at that point you're like, I can only hold 7 gems in my supply, I've already got 6 in there right now, let me dump some of those so I can clear out my space for next round. So I'll sell 3 of them, I get 6 coins. Okay. And then there's a market of cards you can buy from, and these are single-use cards. They basically have a variety of actions on them. They could be anything from like mitigate a dice roll in the future, or jump a space on the board, or take an extra turn, a few other things. And so you can spend money to buy cards. After that, then you can buy what is the actual main root of this game, which is fill an order. So you've got these orders. You're basically, what it says is repairing artifacts. And so you're taking these gems, you're turning them in for artifacts. And the artifacts are worth points. And then there's like some side collection bonuses at the end. And then you pick up that tile that you just landed on. And it's off the board. It's removed from the game. So nobody else can move to that space the rest of the game. And that's how a turn goes. Okay, I just explained a lot of stuff for a turn, right? And that's probably the biggest challenge with this game, is that this is a pretty simple set collection game. And I'll compare it a few times to Splendor. And I think the reason I'm not comparing it just because of the gem theme, because it does share that, although it doesn't feel like that theme, but it is a fairly simple set collection game, like order fulfillment game, similar to Splendor. You get gems, spend them to get resources. So the game was pretty fun. You're moving up this track. You can block. There's a decent amount of player interaction. You can get in front of people. You can take the tiles away where they might have to move up. There's a negative effect if they have to jump over a space that doesn't have a tile on it. You kind of race into the top of the board, because when you get to the top, some of the best bonuses are there, and you trigger the end game, and then some of the tiles below you start falling off. So you're kind of racing up the board. You're kind of racing to fulfill these orders that are out on the board. And you're playing around with this little economy, which, like I said, is after you go and get a gem of that type, you raise this dice by 1 space. So let's say that it's at a 6 right now, and you've now you can mine, but it's going to cost you 6 per gem to mine it. But at the end of this round, it's going to turn down to a 1, and then you won't be able to sell those for much next turn, but they'll be very cheap to mine the next turn. So the economy shifts a little bit on these different types of gems. So, basically it was pretty fun to play. It's a very light midweight game, like lighter than River of Gold easily, but a little bit heavier than Splendor. and gave you a few fun choices, a few fun interactions, that market of cards every time you're going to buy a card, and you're going to start to build up these cards where you can start to then use them later in the game and maybe have a bigger turn because you use a couple of cards and do some fun things with them. Some fun choices with it. Ends in about 45 minutes, so it doesn't play too long. But the challenge with it was that for the game, the group that I played a couple 3-player games, and they prefer, lighter to midweight games, is that they felt there were too many decisions to make on a turn, and it caused 2 issues for them. So one was that, like, basically they couldn't keep track of all this stuff. There's like a player aid says, do these 2 steps, then you have these 4 options. You can do a couple of them many times, and then do these 2 steps at the end. And there was inevitably so many times where I was basically walking everybody else at the table through their turns. Okay, do this, right? And then that also created some downtime because, they take the first action, then they can choose to mine, they roll some dice, they do that. Then they got to look at the market of cards, buy a card. Then I'm going to spend 2 cards, do this, right? And so the turn could go long for what is basically a very simple game where you're getting a couple gems. So it fits in a weird space because it's pretty light from what, like the actual weight of teaching the rules and stuff like that. But it's a bit fiddly and a decent amount to track for actually getting through a turn. And so it doesn't quite fit for like the light player where they don't want to have to think through all those decisions. And it doesn't quite fit for the, kind of the midweight player who, there's just not enough interesting choices to make. But that said, I didn't not enjoy playing through this for 45 minutes. And about the time we were getting to the end of it, I was like, okay, that was enough, right? I made enough choices there, but it didn't overstay its welcome too much. So, it's a first time design by Roberto. And I think for a first time design, it feels pretty decent. It feels like it's needed a little development, like where there's just a few too many steps or things that you have to make decisions on for the weight of the game it is. So yeah, that's about where it fell from a gameplay perspective for me. Now let me talk about the production really quickly, because he did send us I think it's called the iridescent version or something like that. It's basically the deluxe version of the game. And this has some of the coolest production that I've seen in a board game in a long time. The artwork in this, the artist is Sarah Conlon, and this looks like a great like children's storybook style artwork. Probably the closest board game artist I would compare it to would be like Kyle Farron. It's like this slightly, kind of, almost looks like kids artwork, but of course it's much more, much better than that. But it's got this kind of story, like children's storybook feel to it in this, interesting little fantasy world. The map looks beautiful. There are all these tiles laid out, and as you start to turn them over in the iridescent version, it's like, cardboard tiles, like punchboard tiles, but they have these iridescent gems on them. So they look really nice. And then the gems that you pick up are they're chunky wooden pieces, but then they have like iridescent gem stickers on them. So really nice looking production, really great artwork. It's a pretty game on the table. It's a decently fun time to play. It's just, I think finding the right fit for who's looking for a game that is not, that is this light, but actually still requires you to spend a couple minutes on your turn and think through a lot of decisions. My one other thought about it is that although I didn't personally mind all those decisions to make on your turn, the people I was playing with did a little bit more because they like lighter games. The thing that I missed in the game was that there wasn't really any kind of development. Like there was no engine building. The 5th turn of the game felt almost exactly like the 1st turn of the game or the 10th turn of the game. There wasn't a big difference between what I was doing on a turn. Like I think there was almost a missed opportunity to say, when you buy those market cards that are one-time actions, put a couple out there that actually like you put into a tableau and then they just make your, they give you some ongoing ability or something like that. So that I felt by the end of the game, I was actually better than I was at the start of the game. And I didn't really feel that here. So it kind of felt like then it just got redundant, so couple little choices there. Again, I did actually enjoy my plays of it for the time they were though. Have you guys looked at this? Had it been on your radar at all?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now. I can tell Chris was scrolling through the reflection off of his glasses. This artwork is stunning. I want to see more of this art across the board game sphere or just in general in life. It is beautiful. The box art is amazing. The production looks fantastic. I want to see this art as much as possible. It's incredible.
Yeah, I same thing here. Just quickly on the mechanisms, I haven't played the game, obviously, and I'm only familiar with it from what you just said, Tim. But it does sound like a missed opportunity to put some engine building in there. I mean, that's always. I feel like almost every game should have some engine building in it, and so that's unfortunate. But it'll be really interesting to see what Roberto comes up with next.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the one interesting comparison, I mentioned Splendor already, because this does have at least slightly more interesting mechanisms than Splendor, and I would say I'd probably even prefer to play it. But the one thing that I think Splendor always did well, and why it got such a wide audience, is it's got that engine building built in, right? It's like as you buy or as you fulfill orders, you then make your engine bigger, and that again just doesn't happen here. So a slight comparison, just because it was on my mind as I was playing through the game, and kind of mixing and matching there.
But as far as the art goes, I'm with Adam. I think it is absolutely charming. I would love to look at this game more, look through those cards. And I feel like it was a really wise choice to go full cartoon with this art. Because you can go partial cartoon and it doesn't look great. You can go no cartoon and have a very serious looking game or a realistic looking game, and that can be great. But that's clearly not what they were going for here. They just went full on fun kids storybook, which, speaking of which, Tim, you had mentioned Kyle Farron's art, and I think that's a reasonable comparison. But you know what this actually looks like most to me? It reminds me of Richard Scarry's Busy Town.
Yeah.
It reminds me so much of that style of art. It feels like this, it feels pretty immersive, which is a pretty cool thing for a board game to have. There's like a little bit of world building going on there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, agreed. Again, production was fantastic. And I don't want to be nitpicky about this, but the one other thing that was weird about it is that the game's about 45 minutes. And because you have to put these like 45 tiles out on the board and they're in certain layers, so like there's like 12 of each type of 5, and then there's 5 on the top row. It was a decent amount of setup and a decent amount of tear down to put everything back in the right spaces and everything. So I probably spent about 10 minutes plus getting it set up, and then like 10 minutes plus tearing it down, which again, we were talking about fillers last week, and this would almost fill in that space. Like the amount of time it took it to play it was about a filler level game. You could knock it out in 30 minutes or 40 minutes before the start of a game night, but you'd have to spend 10 minutes setting it up and then 10 minutes tearing it down. So it kind of missed that as well. And again, I'm not saying anything here is bad. Roberto even said in the little intro, I think I don't remember if it's in the letter he sent to me or if it was the in the rule book, but he said somewhere in there that this is made to be like a kind of a crunchy gateway game. It's made to fit in that space where you like meteor games, but the people you're playing with are just kind of getting into the hobby. So this gives you some more choices without being overly complex. And I think that's right. And how well it hits is really going to kind of be, where do you fit in that realm? I know we've got listeners who regularly say we don't really talk about the types of games they play because the games we play are weightier, they're longer. And so this might be a really good fit for somebody that's just looking for that kind of shorter game, pretty straightforward to get into, and still has some fun choices without being, crazy. It probably fits right in that realm. Wasn't quite something that I would be asking to play again, or I would probably not go back. I won't, but it's probably a decent fit for a lot of people. So, and again, the production it does make it charming. It was fun to look at those cards and look at the characters and the board itself. So, I did post a picture on just if you want to see it on our Blue Sky account a few days ago, so you can take a look at what that looks like. All right. Well, I think that will wrap up this episode. We are running just a little bit long tonight, so I'll catch up on reviews next week. Until next week, take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Bye-bye.